All right, so imagine this. A nursery,
Okay.
but instead of like the usual cute animals and ABCs,
Hmm.
the walls are covered with calculus, like serious math stuff.
Yeah.
Turns out the dad, he was trying to save money on wallpaper, not exactly a genius parenting move, right?
Right.
But for his daughter, Sofia Kovalevskaya, it was like walking into some secret hidden world.
Hmm.
She even said that later, like even at 11, before she even knew what it all meant. Those formulas on the wall, they felt like music without lyrics. Pretty cool way to put it, huh?
Yeah, it is.
So today, we're diving into Sofia's life. A woman in 19th century Russia who didn't just see those math walls. She, smashed through all these societal walls, too, to become, well, a seriously important mathematician.
Absolutely. Let's figure out how she did
Yeah,
it.
well, let's go. So, this is Sofia Kovalevskaya, and she lived in a time, we're talking 19th century Russia, in Europe, too, where a woman doing high-level math, forget about a career in science. It was, almost unthinkable back then.
Yeah. The stuff you sent over, it's a really good look at, like the big moments in her life, her achievements, all that. And so what we want to do in this deep dive is really get into what she did, how she thought the sheer willpower that let her not just navigate all these barriers, but really shatter them.
Right.
And then on top of that, make these huge contributions to math.
Okay, so let's go back to that wallpaper.
Yeah.
Because it really sets the scene. This wasn't some, planned thing, to make her a math whiz. It was just, a cheap dad.
Right.
But it lit a fire in her, this fascination with, big ideas, even before she got the details. And it's the total opposite of what girls were supposed to do back then,
Yeah.
Embroidery, housework, all that stuff. And here's Sophia, not only drawn to these crazy symbols, but, the source mentions, she's playing with prisms, dissecting light, even writing poems about infinity. That hunger to know things, it jumps right out at you.
What's really interesting here is you have this spark, this passion, and then it slams right into a wall of what society expected.
Right.
Russia in the 1860s, women, they had their roles, and those roles were pretty much all about home and family.
Yeah.
Sophia, with all this intellectual curiosity and this pull toward math, she was totally going against the grain. And her dad, he actually says absurd. That's how he reacts to her being into math. It just shows you how deep these attitudes were.
Yeah.
And women, no universities for them, doors closed. This early frustration being blocked from knowledge, well, it kind of sets up the whole wild, unconventional path she had to take. And it tells us something important right away.
Yeah.
When the system's got these barriers, sometimes you got to get creative to get around them.
Yeah, and creative is putting it mildly. So we're talking about this fictitious marriage, right?
Yeah.
She's only 18 when she marries this Vladimir Kovalevsky. It sounds like something out of a movie, honestly.
Yeah.
But this wasn't about romance. This was calculated. Vladimir was a scholar himself, a bit of a radical thinker, but he actually got behind her, wanting to learn, which was, not typical for the time.
No, not at all.
And them moving to Germany, it wasn't just moving house. It was, like the source says, a total act of rebellion. Getting to a place where Sophia might actually get to learn, which Russia just wouldn't allow.
That's exactly it. I mean, a fictitious marriage, it sounds like a big drama to us now, but back then it was a thing women did.
Right.
Not super common and, still kind of risky, but it was a way for women in 19th century Russia to get an education abroad if they really wanted it. So for Sophia, it gave her the social cover she needed and, importantly, a passport. She could leave the country and chase her intellectual dreams, so to speak. And Vladimir, his support, at least at first, was a big part of her getting out of that stifling environment in Russia, then moving to Germany. That's the real start of her journey into academia, a world that was basically all men. And a lot of them they weren't exactly thrilled to have women around.
Yeah.
And this brings up a good point. Sometimes to break through these really ingrained barriers, you got to do things that might seem a little unconventional, even if they don't seem totally, real.
Right.
What strikes you about this first move of hers?
It's got to be the pure determination, to go that far, a marriage, not for love, but to be free to learn. It says a lot about how much she valued knowledge.
It does.
But even in Germany, it wasn't like, welcome, here's your classroom. At Heidelberg, all she could do was audit classes. And even then, there were all these rules. Stand in the back, no talking, basically be invisible. She was there, but not really there, if you get what I mean.
Yeah, I get it.
And then there's this meeting, this big one, in Berlin with Karl Weierstrass. This guy's a giant in the math world, like father of modern analysis.
Age. Yeah.
And he basically tells her no, and she has to learn from. Can you imagine being shut down like that by someone that important?
Oh, man, this moment with Weierstrass, it just shows you the sexism she was up against. She's clearly passionate. She's got a sharp mind. But just being a woman, that was enough for this, like, leading mathematician to say no right off the bat. And being the father of modern analysis, that means Weierstrass, he basically shaped how we understand and do advanced math today. So his rejection, it wasn't just like a personal thing. It was like this belief that women just weren't smart enough for math. Like, that's what people believed. But here's the thing, the really cool thing. Sofia, she doesn't just take this no lying down. She throws down this challenge. She says, bring me a problem no one can solve. Boom, that's Sofia.
Yeah.
She believed in herself, and she was going to make him see it too. And it shows us something else, something important. When the doors are closed, sometimes you got to kick them open yourself.
Wow.
You got to have that confidence. You got to be ready for the challenge.
And the problem he gives her, the Navier-Stokes equations. For those of us who aren't, math geniuses, this is like notoriously hard stuff, right?
Yeah.
Trying to figure out how smoke moves or how water flows around a rock. These equations, they're all about describing those movements, but super complicated.
Very complex.
Even now, like figuring out the complete solution to Navier-Stokes, that's one of the big ones, still unsolved in math and physics. And he gives her that as a test. It's almost like he wanted her to fail, or at least, give up.
Yeah, it's possible he was thinking, all right, let's see what you've got. Let's see if you can handle this, maybe with a bit of, doubt, But Sofia, she was dedicated and she had real talent. It was clear. A complete general solution. No, she didn't get that. Nobody has. But she made a lot of progress. And she really understood the math behind it all. That's what finally made Weierstrass say, okay, I'll teach you. He became her mentor, but not at the university,
Right.
It was private, but still, it was a big win for her. And it shows that sometimes, when the official way is blocked, finding someone who believes in you, a mentor, it can change everything.
And even with Weierstrass in her corner, the prejudice didn't just disappear, did it?
No, not at all.
The source talks about these snide comments from other male mathematicians.
Mm-hmm.
Felix Klein, another big name, he calls her work Weierstrass's shadow. Ouch. Like she's got no ideas of her own. It's just so disrespectful,
Yeah.
It shows how some men back then just had to put women down, especially smart women. But even with all that, she does something huge, the Cauchy-Kovalevskaya Theorem. And it's about partial differential equations.
Yeah.
The source says it's like immortalized. So it's got to be pretty important.
Oh, yeah. It's huge in the world of partial differential equations. Now, those equations, they're tools, basically. They describe how things change when lots of different factors are involved, like how temperature changes on a surface over time, or how pressure and velocity change in something that's flowing like a liquid.
Okay.
The Cauchy-Kovalevskaya theorem, well, it basically says, under these conditions, this type of equation will have one solution and it'll behave nicely. That's super important for scientists and engineers because it tells them, hey, our math models, they're reliable. We can use them to predict things in the real world. And Sofia proves this theorem while people are doubting her, saying she's just copying Weierstrass.
It's incredible.
It's a testament to her talent and her strength. She didn't let sexism stop her. It shows that amazing things can happen even when people are trying to hold you back.
It's almost hard to believe how much she had to fight every step of the way. And it wasn't just work. Her personal life was tough, too.
Yeah.
That marriage, which was supposed to, set her free intellectually, it started to fall apart. And Vladimir, her husband, he had depression. And then, tragically, he committed suicide in 1883.
That's right.
Imagine the weight of that on top of everything else.
It's hard to even imagine.
And then she goes back to Russia thinking, maybe now they'll accept me, my own country. And what happens? More rejection. The source says they practically laughed at her when she wanted to be a professor.
Yeah.
It's so sad, You really see the emotional cost of all these barriers.
It's impossible to separate her personal life from her professional life. I mean, the stress of her marriage failing and then Vladimir dying like that, it must have been devastating. But even with all that pain, she kept doing math. And she did it with, this incredible intensity.
Yeah.
It's like her work was a comfort, but also, a driving force. And then Russia, her own country, they wouldn't acknowledge her, even after she was getting recognized internationally.
Right.
Talk about disappointment. It's almost like she had superhuman resilience to keep going through all that.
Amazing.
Maybe math was her anchor, something stable in a world that seemed to be against her. And it tells you something, sometimes what you're passionate about, that can be what gets you through the really tough times.
And she did have a big breakthrough, finally, at least in Europe. This appointment in Stockholm.
Right.
Goes to Mathematic Leffler, another mathematician. He really took a chance on her. He made her Europe's first female full professor. That must have felt huge, like she finally broke through.
It was a big moment, for sure. Like a crack in that glass ceiling everyone was talking about. Mathematic Leffler's support, it was crucial. He helped her get past all the sexism in European academia. But even with this win, it wasn't all smooth sailing. The source mentions student boycotts and nasty criticisms. August Strindberg, the playwright, he said having a female professor was unnatural.
Wow.
It just shows you these prejudices, they ran deep.
Yeah.
And Sofia, she was still under pressure, even as a professor. It wasn't a total victory, but it was a step forward. And it shows that even when you achieve something, the fight for equality, it can keep going.
Unnatural. It's unbelievable that she'd face that kind of open hostility even then. But she didn't back down. She took on that role with determination.
It's amazing.
And then in 1888, this incredible thing happens. She solves the rigid body problem. This was, like the source says, a problem that had stumped some of the greatest minds in math for decades. Euler, Lagrange, all those guys.
Yeah.
This wasn't just any problem. It was a major one in mechanics.
Absolutely. The general case, the rotation of a rigid body, one that's asymmetrical, think of a top, but one that's wobbly, not perfectly balanced. Figuring out how it moves, that was the problem. Euler and Lagrange, they'd cracked it for specific situations, simplified ones. But the full solution, that had everyone stumped for years.
Right.
And Sofia, she threw herself into it, working alone for months. The source describes her desk piled with notes, coffee cups everywhere. That's dedication.
Wow.
It was intense, just pure focus.
And then there's this sleepless night. Yeah, it's almost legendary, right? That's when it all clicks, the kind of breakthrough that scientists and mathematicians dream of. And this solution she finds, it's elegant, it's revolutionary, and it wins her the Borden Prize. The source calls it one of the highest honors in math. That's got to be up there.
It is, absolutely.
And get this, the committee, they were so surprised it was a woman who solved it, they doubled the prize money.
It's almost funny, isn't it?
You'd think that kind of recognition worldwide would finally shut up the doubters back in Russia, wouldn't you?
You would hope so, wouldn't you? I mean, she gets this award, a big one, for solving a problem that had stumped everyone for ages. That should have been enough.
Right.
But the Russian Academy of Sciences, they still wouldn't let her in. It shows you that the sexism was just baked into those institutions.
It's just infuriating.
It really is. She achieves all this, she gets the awards, and still they wouldn't accept her. External validation. Sometimes it doesn't matter when the prejudice is that strong.
So frustrating. She did all that groundbreaking work, got all the accolades, and she was still fighting just to be recognized in her own country. And then, tragically, her health starts to decline. The source talks about this difficult journey she takes to St. Petersburg in the middle of winter to plead for a teaching position, which they end up denying her. It's just heartbreaking.
It is.
And then she gets pneumonia and she dies so young, only 41. Thinking about her daughter, too, in her final moments.
It's a sad ending to a life that was, so full of amazing intellectual achievements, but also this constant draining fight against the way things were.
Yeah.
But even though she died young, Sofia Kovalevskaya's work in math, it's had a huge impact. The Kovalevskaya top, that specific case of the rigid body problem she solved, it's still a cornerstone in mechanics. And her Cauchy-Kovalevskaya Theorem, that's a fundamental result.
Right.
It's got implications in all sorts of areas, even like quantum physics.
Yeah.
But it's not just about the specific math she did. Her legacy as a woman in math, that's huge too. The Association for Women in Mathematics, they have workshops named after her. That tells you something.
It does.
She really paved the way for women in the field.
Absolutely. The source describes her life as this, repeating pattern of resistance, at every level. It wasn't just about figuring out math problems. It was about challenging a world that was always trying to tell her what she could and couldn't do. And that brings us back to why you wanted to talk about her today.
Yeah.
You wanted to understand how someone can break through these impossible seeming obstacles and pursue their passions and knowledge. And Sofia, her life, it's a powerful, inspiring example of that.
It really is.
It makes you think about your own life, doesn't it? Like, what are your wallpapered nurseries? The doubts, the pressure, the voices saying you can't do it or you don't belong.
That's a great question. I mean, Sofia's story, it goes beyond just math, right? It's about a universal experience, this facing limitations, the ones the world throws at you and the ones we put on ourselves. And her life, it gives us an answer, a powerful one. Burn the wallpaper. Write your own equations.
I love that.
Don't let others define what you can do. Make your own path. Follow your curiosity, your passions, what you're good at.
So the big takeaway here isn't just about theorems or spinning tops. It's that Sofia Kovalevskaya's life was like this act of defiance. She wasn't just solving problems. She was taking on a whole world that tried to hold her back. She was stubborn, she was brilliant, and because of her, countless women after her could follow in her footsteps.
It leaves us with a question, a thought-provoking one. Think about the challenges in your own life that seem impossible to overcome. Sofia's story asks us, impossible for whom? Maybe just questioning that, not accepting the limits that others or even we put on ourselves, maybe that's the first step to finding your own breakthrough, your own solution.
Absolutely. And if this deep dive into Sofia's amazing life has sparked something in you, well, go check out the Cauchy-Kovalevskaya Theorem. Or maybe dive into the mechanics of the Kovalevskaya top. It's fascinating stuff, I promise.
It is. Here's to recognizing those walls, the visible ones, the invisible ones, and tearing them down. The walls that stand in the way of knowledge, progress, and people reaching their full potential.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yes.
Until next time, everyone.